What if money has never been your real problem at all? And what if the struggle you call financial is only the visible symptom of an unseen law you have been violating every day without knowing it? If that question unsettles you, it should, because the mind resists responsibility before it resists poverty. Most people want money to change without ever allowing their thinking to be examined. They curse the economy, their upbringing, their luck, their country, their timing, their education, their connections, yet they never pause long enough to consider the one arena where all causes originate. Napoleon Hill understood something most never dare to face. Money is an obedient servant to law, and law does not negotiate with excuses. It responds only to alignment. When you apply the correct mental law, money stops behaving like an enemy and begins revealing itself as a consequence. Not a reward, not a gift, not a miracle, but an effect that follows a cause with ruthless precision. The tragedy is not that people are poor. The tragedy is that they believe poverty is external. Hill observed, after interviewing hundreds of the wealthiest minds of his era, that money flows toward those who have mastered an inner order long before they mastered a market. The external struggle is loud and chaotic, but the internal struggle is quiet and decisive. It happens in the unseen corridors of thought, belief, fear, and decision. This is where fortunes are either conceived or aborted. From childhood, most minds are trained to see money as something separate from themselves. It is something you chase, something you lack, something you fear losing, something you resent others for having. That separation is fatal. Money does not respond to need. It does not respond to desperation. It does not respond to morality, hard work, or suffering. It responds to definiteness. Hill's most dangerous idea was not positive thinking, as it is often diluted into today. His idea was far sharper and more demanding. He taught that money obeys the law of definiteness of purpose fused with burning desire, backed by faith, expressed through organized action, and sustained by persistence. Remove any one of these, and money becomes unstable, inconsistent, or entirely absent. Most people live with vague wishes disguised as goals. They say they want more money, financial freedom, or a better life, but their minds never crystallize these desires into a precise demand upon life. The subconscious mind cannot act on fog. It requires clarity the way a blade requires an edge. When purpose is undefined, effort scatters. When effort scatters, results fracture. And when results fracture, money becomes unpredictable, arriving in small bursts and disappearing just as quickly. This creates the illusion that money is unreliable, when in truth it is the thinker who is inconsistent. Hill discovered that definiteness is the first gatekeeper of wealth. A person who does not know exactly what they want financially and why they want it is not merely confused, they are powerless. The subconscious mind is a mechanism of execution, not exploration. It does not decide your destiny, it carries out your dominant instructions. If those instructions are weak, contradictory, or poisoned by doubt, the mechanism obeys them perfectly. Money then reflects that internal confusion by coming in uncertain amounts, under uncertain conditions, or not at all. But definiteness alone is insufficient. A cold goal without emotional heat produces nothing. This is where burning desire enters, not as enthusiasm, but as obsession refined by discipline. Hill was clear. Desire must be intense enough to crowd out fear. Most people say they want money, but their desire is polite. It does not dominate their thinking. It does not reorganize their habits. It does not demand sacrifice. It does not invade their self-image. And because it remains passive, fear remains active. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of responsibility. Where fear rules, money withdraws. The subconscious mind does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you feel is inevitable. Burning desire creates inevitability. It conditions the mind to expect achievement, not hope for it. This expectation is not fantasy. It is an internal decision that no alternative outcome is acceptable. When desire reaches this level, behavior changes without force. Discipline becomes natural. Persistence becomes automatic. Excuses lose their emotional appeal. Money senses this alignment because money is the byproduct of value rendered with conviction. Hill emphasized faith not as religious belief, but as a state of mind produced by repetition and emotional intensity. Faith is the absence of inner contradiction. It is the mind no longer arguing with itself. Most people sabotage themselves financially, not through laziness, but through internal debate. One part of the mind desires wealth, another part fears it. One part dreams of independence, another part clings to security. This division creates paralysis. Faith resolves the division by choosing one identity and reinforcing it until doubt loses its voice. Autosuggestion is the tool through which faith is built. It is not affirmation in the shallow sense. It is the deliberate feeding of the subconscious with emotionally charged instructions repeated until they become belief. The subconscious does not analyze truth. It accepts repetition. Whatever dominates your inner dialogue eventually becomes your operating system. If your inner speech is filled with limitation, scarcity, and resignation, money will obey that script. If your inner speech is disciplined, purposeful, and certain, money will align with that certainty. This is why Hill insisted on daily mental programming. Not because words have magic, but because thoughts repeated with emotion carve pathways in the nervous system. These pathways dictate perception, decision-making, and action. Money does not come from opportunity alone, it comes from recognizing opportunity. Two people can stand before the same market, the same idea, the same moment in time. One sees risk and walks away, the other sees possibility and moves forward. The difference is not intelligence, it is conditioning. Persistence is the great separator Hill identified between those who accumulate wealth and those who flirt with it. Persistence is not stubbornness. It is loyalty to a decision long after emotion has faded. Most people mistake enthusiasm for commitment. They begin with energy, but abandon the pursuit when resistance appears. Resistance is not a sign of failure. It is the law testing the seriousness of your intent. Money moves toward those who can endure monotony, uncertainty, and delayed reward without retreating into self-pity. Every major financial breakthrough is preceded by a period of pressure. This pressure is designed to expose weakness in belief. Those who interpret pressure as a signal to quit fail the test. Those who interpret it as confirmation continue. Hill observed that the majority of fortunes are assembled after repeated defeats, because defeat forces the mind to refine its strategy, strengthen its resolve, and eliminate illusion. The person who cannot endure defeat cannot command money because money demands resilience. Self-discipline is the invisible structure that holds all other principles together. Without it, desire burns chaotically, faith fluctuates, and persistence collapses under fatigue. Discipline is the ability to direct attention regardless of emotional state. It is choosing action when comfort is absent. Money respects discipline because discipline produces reliability. Markets reward reliability. People pay those they can trust. Trust is not built through talent alone. It is built through consistency of behavior. Fear mastery is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Hill's philosophy. Fear does not vanish through denial. It is neutralized through understanding. Hill identified fear as a state of mind that can be controlled. Poverty consciousness is rooted in fear. Fear of insufficiency, fear of loss, fear of rejection. These fears cause people to make small decisions, safe decisions, and familiar decisions. Money does not accumulate in safe patterns. It accumulates where calculated risk meets preparation. The imagination is the workshop of all wealth. Before money appears in form, it exists in thought. Every enterprise, invention, and fortune was once an image held in the mind. Hill distinguished between synthetic imagination, which rearranges existing ideas, and creative imagination, which taps into deeper sources of insight. Those who master imagination do not wait for permission to envision themselves as capable, worthy, and successful. They rehearse success mentally until it becomes familiar. The mind then seeks to externalize what feels familiar. Decision is the moment where all inner work becomes visible. Indecision is the enemy of accumulation. Hill found that successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly. The unsuccessful do the opposite. Indecision keeps the mind open to influence, doubt, and fear. A decided mind closes ranks. It stops negotiating with uncertainty. Money moves toward decision because decision produces movement. Stagnant minds create stagnant finances. Underlying all of these principles is what Hill called the invisible mental forces. Thought is not passive, it is energy. It influences behavior, attracts conditions, and shapes relationships. Whether one interprets this through psychology, neurology, or metaphysical law, the result is the same. The dominant thoughts you hold determine the direction of your life. Money does not flow randomly. It follows channels carved by belief, habit, and action. When you apply this law, the law of internal alignment, money stops being a problem because problems dissolve when causes are corrected. The external struggle ends when the internal contradiction is resolved. Money ceases to be an emotional battleground and becomes a measurable outcome. You stop chasing it not because you no longer want it, but because your focus shifts to value, purpose, and execution. Money follows those who no longer beg it to stay. This is not comfort, this is responsibility. It demands that you abandon the fantasy of rescue. It demands that you accept that your financial condition is a mirror, not a verdict. Mirrors do not lie, but they can be changed by changing what stands before them. Hill's philosophy is ruthless in this regard. It offers no sympathy, only power. The power to think deliberately, to desire intensely, to act persistently, and to decide finally. If money has been a problem in your life, it is because a law has been ignored, misunderstood, or violated. Laws do not punish, they simply respond. Gravity does not hate the man who falls. Money does not hate the thinker who repels it. Both operate without emotion. When you align with the law, resistance disappears. When you fight it, struggle multiplies. This is the threshold, not yet action, but awareness. The realization that wealth is not outside you waiting to be found, but inside you waiting to be organized. Until the mind is ordered, money will remain chaotic. Until desire is defined, money will remain elusive. Until fear is mastered, money will remain unstable. This is not theory. This is the anatomy of results. The question is no longer whether money can stop being a problem. The question is whether you are willing to apply the law without compromise, without delay, and without retreat. The moment awareness dawns, a new pressure begins to form inside the mind, a pressure far more uncomfortable than ignorance. It is the pressure of knowing that the struggle is not imposed from the outside, but maintained from within. This is where most people retreat. They sense the weight of responsibility and instinctively search for relief, distraction, or denial. Yet this pressure is not an enemy. It is the signal that the law is beginning to work. Napoleon Hill understood that transformation does not arrive gently. It arrives as a confrontation between who you have been and who you must become. The second phase of this law reveals itself through the reorganization of identity. Money does not respond to effort alone. It responds to the self-image directing that effort. A person can work endlessly and remain financially stagnant if their self-concept is anchored in limitation. The subconscious mind will always defend identity over ambition. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, hustles, survives, or barely gets by, the mind will unconsciously sabotage opportunities that threaten that familiar identity. This sabotage is subtle. It appears as procrastination, overthinking, hesitation, or choosing comfort over growth. To the conscious mind, these feel like rational decisions. To the law, they are violations. Hill emphasized that the subconscious mind accepts whatever identity is impressed upon it through repetition and emotion. This is why early conditioning is so powerful. Years of hearing that money is scarce, that wealth is dangerous, that rich people are dishonest, that success is reserved for a lucky few, all embed themselves as emotional truths. These beliefs do not sit idle. They operate like silent governors, limiting speed regardless of how hard the engine pushes. Until these governors are removed, effort will always outpace results and frustration will deepen. The law demands that identity be deliberately reconstructed. This is not pretending. It is choosing a higher internal standard and enforcing it until it becomes natural. The mind must be trained to see wealth not as an anomaly, but as a normal outcome of disciplined thinking. This requires confronting inherited beliefs with relentless honesty. You must observe your automatic thoughts when money enters the conversation. Do you tense? Do you feel guilt? Do you feel doubt? Do you feel unworthiness? These reactions are evidence. They reveal the internal resistance that repels accumulation. Hill taught that the conscious and subconscious must be brought into agreement. Conflict between them produces anxiety, inconsistency, and self-sabotage. Agreement produces flow. This agreement is forged through autosuggestion, but autosuggestion must be precise, emotionally charged, and repeated under conditions of focus. Vague affirmations do nothing. The subconscious requires specificity. It responds to images, emotions, and conviction. You are not convincing the world, you are convincing the part of you that controls behavior. As this internal alignment strengthens, perception begins to shift. Opportunities that were once invisible become obvious. This is not luck, it is attention, and the mind cannot act on what it does not perceive. When your dominant thought change, your filters change, you begin to notice patterns, needs, inefficiencies, and possibilities that align with your purpose. Money flows toward those who solve problems, and problem-solving requires awareness. Awareness is conditioned by belief. One of Hill's most unsettling observations was that most people are poor not because they lack ability, but because they lack decisiveness. Decision is the axis upon which wealth turns. Indecision fractures energy. It keeps the mind in a state of perpetual rehearsal without performance. People deliberate endlessly, seeking certainty before action, not realizing that certainty is created through action. The law does not reward contemplation, it rewards commitment. Every financial leap requires a moment where doubt is overridden by decision. This moment is uncomfortable because it feels like stepping into the unknown. Yet the unknown is only unknown to the conscious mind. The subconscious has already accepted the outcome if it has been properly conditioned. Decision is simply the conscious alignment with that deeper conviction. When decision is made, energy consolidates, thoughts organize, behavior sharpens, money responds to this coherence. Hill noted that fear is the primary cause of indecision. Fear whispers of loss, embarrassment, failure, and regret. But fear itself is not the enemy. It is a signal of growth. The presence of fear indicates that the mind is approaching the boundary of its current identity. Retreating reinforces limitation. Advancing expands capacity. Those who accumulate wealth learn to move with fear present, not absent. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is obedience to purpose despite fear. Persistence then becomes the sustaining force. Once decision is made, persistence protects it from erosion. The world will test resolve through delay, resistance, and discouragement. These tests are not random. They are mechanisms of selection. The law filters out those whose commitment is shallow. Each obstacle asks the same question in a different form. How badly do you want this, and what are you willing to endure for it? Those who answer with persistence are granted access to the next level. Hill observed that persistence is rooted in habit. Habits are the architecture of destiny. Financial outcomes are not created by occasional brilliance, but by daily discipline. The mind seeks efficiency. It will default to familiar patterns unless new ones are enforced. This is why initial progress often feels forced and unnatural. You are overriding years of conditioning. With repetition, the unnatural becomes natural. Discipline becomes automatic. Effort becomes identity. Self-discipline extends beyond work ethic. It governs thought selection. You must learn to refuse thoughts that weaken resolve. This is not repression, it is command. The disciplined mind does not entertain doubt as entertainment. It does not indulge in negative speculation. It recognizes that every thought either builds or erodes momentum. Money responds to momentum. Stagnant minds produce stagnant results. Another critical aspect of the law is the mastery of emotional energy. Emotions are fuel. When undirected, they dissipate. When focused, they amplify. Hill taught that sexual energy, ambition, desire, and passion can be transmuted into creative force. This transmutation is not mystical, it is psychological. High emotional states increase intensity, focus, and drive. When these states are consciously redirected toward purpose, productivity multiplies. Most people waste emotional energy on worry, envy, resentment, and regret. These emotions drain vitality and reinforce scarcity consciousness. The disciplined thinker learns to convert emotion into action. When frustration arises, it is used as motivation. When anger arises, it is channeled into determination. When desire arises, it is organized into strategy. Emotion becomes an ally instead of a liability. The imagination plays a central role in this process. Visualization is not fantasy, it is rehearsal. The mind does not distinguish sharply between imagined and experienced events. When you vividly imagine success, the nervous system responds as if it were real. This conditions confidence, reduces fear, and primes behavior. Those who fail to imagine success subconsciously rehearse failure instead. They visualize obstacles, rejection, and loss. The law responds accordingly. Hill's concept of the mastermind introduces another layer of T. Law. Wealth is rarely created in isolation. It emerges from the coordinated effort of aligned minds. The mastermind is not merely networking. It is the synchronization of purpose, belief, and intention among individuals. When minds align toward a definite objective, they create a collective intelligence greater than the sum of its parts. Opportunities, ideas, and resources emerge from this alignment, yet the mastermind principle demands humility and discernment. Association shapes thinking. If you surround yourself with those who doubt, complain, and rationalize failure, their mental habits will infect yours. The law is impartial. It amplifies whatever dominates the environment. Choose associations that reinforce discipline, ambition, and integrity. This is not elitism, it is self-preservation. As the law integrates more deeply, your relationship with time begins to change. Impatience fades, urgency sharpens. You stop demanding immediate reward and start respecting process. Hill emphasized that time is an ally to those who persist. Compounding applies not only to money, but to belief, skill, and reputation. Small daily actions accumulate into massive results. Those who quit early never experience this compounding effect. Money problems often persist because people abandon strategies prematurely. They misinterpret slow progress as failure. In reality, the early stages of any worthwhile pursuit are invisible. Roots grow before branches. The law requires faith during this invisible phase. Faith is not blind optimism, it is trust in process. Those who trust process continue. Those who demand proof retreat. Another dimension of the law is integrity. Money gravitates toward trust. Trust is built through consistency between word and action. When you say you will do something and you do it, you strengthen self-trust. Self-trust then radiates outward. Others sense reliability. Opportunities follow. When you break promises to yourself, even small ones, you erode internal authority. The subconscious registers this as weakness. Confidence declines. Money withdraws. Hill was explicit that ethical conduct is not optional, not because of morality alone, but because deception fractures the mind. A divided mind cannot focus fully. Guilt, fear of exposure, and internal conflict consume energy that could be directed toward creation. Sustainable wealth requires inner coherence. Integrity aligns conscious intent with subconscious acceptance. The law rewards alignment. As these principles compound, a subtle shift occurs. Money stops being emotional. It becomes operational. You stop attaching self-worth to financial fluctuations. Wins do not inflate ego. Losses do not destroy confidence. This emotional neutrality is powerful. It allows clear thinking under pressure. Markets reward clarity. People reward stability. Those who panic repel opportunity. Those who remain composed attract it. Hill's philosophy does not promise ease. It promises mastery. Mastery of T, thought, emotion, habit, and decision. When mastery increases, struggle decreases, not because challenges vanish, but because capacity expands. Money problems shrink in proportion to internal growth. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. This is the midpoint of the journey. Awareness has been established. Identity is being reshaped. Discipline is taking root. The law is responding not with sudden miracles, but with structural change. The foundation is forming beneath the surface. The question now is not whether the law works, but whether you will continue to apply it when novelty fades and resistance intensifies, because the next stage demands even greater internal authority, and only those who have mastered themselves are permitted to command results. As the foundation settles, a new tension emerges, quieter but more demanding. This is the tension between knowing the law and living it under pressure. Many reach this stage and mistake understanding for embodiment. They can explain the principles, quote the ideas, even teach them to others, yet their results remain inconsistent. Napoleon Hill warned that knowledge without emotional integration is powerless. The law does not respond to what you know, it responds to what you have become. Chunk 3 is where the transformation either deepens or collapses, because this is where the mind is tested not by ignorance but by endurance. At this stage, the subconscious begins to assist change more aggressively. Old habits do not surrender quietly. They surface disguised as logic, fatigue, and practicality. You may feel an urge to slow down, to settle, to accept a smaller vision as realistic. This is not wisdom. It is the subconscious attempting to restore equilibrium. The mind seeks familiarity, not growth. Growth threatens identity, and identity is defended instinctively. Hill understood this resistance as a sign of progress. When the mind pushes back, it means the new pattern is gaining strength. The law now demands emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is the ability to feel discomfort without seeking escape. Most financial failure is emotional failure first. People abandon plans not because the plan fails, but because their emotional tolerance is exceeded. Boredom, frustration, impatience, and doubt become excuses to quit. Those who master money learn to sit with these emotions without acting on them. They observe them as temporary states, not commands. This emotional restraint preserves momentum. Hill placed enormous emphasis on controlled attention. Attention is the gatekeeper of thought. Whatever you repeatedly focus on gains power over you. In this phase, distractions become more seductive. The world offers endless stimuli designed to fragment focus. Fragmented focus weakens desire. Weak desire dissolves persistence. The law requires sustained attention on a definite aim. This does not mean obsession to the point of imbalance, but it does mean refusal to scatter energy across trivial pursuits. Here, the imagination must be elevated from visualization to strategy. Visualization without execution becomes escapism. The disciplined mind uses imagination T. O-plan, anticipate obstacles, and rehearse solutions. You begin to think several steps ahead. You prepare mentally for resistance so that when it arrives, it does not shock you. Surprise is a form of vulnerability. Prepared minds are harder to destabilize. Hill spoke often of adversity as a teacher. Every setback carries information. Those who see only loss miss the lesson and repeat the mistake. Those who analyze adversity extract value from it. The law favors learners. Learning requires humility. Ego resists correction. When ego dominates, mistakes are blamed on external factors. When humility governs, mistakes become data. Data refines strategy. Refined strategy improves results. At this stage, patience is tested. Not passive patience, but active patience. Active patience continues working without visible reward. It trusts that results are accumulating beneath the surface. Hill observed that most people quit just before the breakthrough because the pressure peaks at the point of transition. This is not coincidence. The law applies maximum resistance before releasing maximum reward. Those who endure cross the threshold. Those who retreat remain convinced that success is elusive. Another internal shift occurs here, the detachment from approval. Early in the journey, external validation feels important. You want reassurance that you are on the right path. Over time, this need must die. Dependence on approval makes you vulnerable to opinion. Opinion is unstable. Markets, PE, opal, and circumstances fluctuate. If your confidence fluctuates with them, consistency is impossible. The law rewards those who can stand alone mentally. Hill emphasized that leadership of self precedes leadership of others. Before money flows through you, authority must be established within you. Authority is the quiet certainty that does not argue or boast. It is reflected in posture, speech, and decision-making. Others sense it intuitively. Opportunities gravitate toward authority because authority implies reliability. People entrust resources to those who appear internally ordered. This phase also exposes hidden conflicts around responsibility. Money amplifies responsibility. With more resources comes greater consequence. Many subconsciously fear this burden. They associate wealth with stress, scrutiny, and loss of freedom. These associations create resistance. The law cannot deliver what the mind secretly rejects. These fears must be confronted consciously. You must redefine wealth as capacity, not burden, as choice, not trap. Hill taught that clarity of motive matters. Why you want money influences how the law responds. If money is pursued solely as escape, it remains unstable. If it is pursued as expression of purpose, it gains stability. Purpose anchors wealth. Without purpose, money becomes anxiety-producing. With purpose, it becomes a tool. The law supports purpose because purpose organizes effort beyond self-indulgence. In this stage, habits solidify. You beggy and to act consistently regardless of mood. This is a critical marker of transformation. Mood-driven behavior produces erratic results. Principle-driven behavior produces compounding results. You no longer wait to feel motivated. You act because action is aligned with identity. Identity-driven action conserves energy. Decision fatigue diminishes. Progress accelerates quietly. The role of environment becomes more pronounced. You may feel a growing distance between yourself and those who do not share your discipline. This can produce loneliness. Loneliness is another test. The law does not require isolation, but it does require discernment. You cannot expect to rise while remaining emotionally entangled with patterns that pull you downward. This separation is not rejection of others, it is commitment to self-mastery. Hill's concept of the mastermind evolves here. It becomes less about seeking support and more about collaboration. You are no longer looking for encouragement, you are exchanging value. Conversations become sharper, more focused, more purposeful. Time feels more valuable. Wasted hours feel costly. This is not obsession, it is respect for life energy. The law rewards those who respect their own time. Fear changes form at this stage. Early fear is about failure, later fear is about success. Success demands consistency at a higher level. It removes excuses, it exposes character. Many retreat unconsciously to avoid this exposure. They sabotage momentum just as it builds. Awareness of this pattern is crucial. You must watch for self-sabotage disguised as prudence. Hill warned that the comfort zone is wealth's greatest enemy. Comfort dulls desire. Desire is the engine of achievement. You must continually renew desire by reconnecting with purpose. Purpose is not static. It deepens as capacity expands. Revisit your vision. Refine it. Make it emotionally vivid again. The subconscious responds to freshness and intensity. The invisible forces Hill described become more noticeable now. Coincidences increase. Helpful people appear. Information arrives at the right moment. This is not mysticism divorced from effort. It is alignment producing efficiency. When thought, emotion, and action align, friction decreases. Life feels less resistant. Money flows with fewer obstacles. The law is not bending, you are aligning, yet complacency is dangerous here. Early success can breed relaxation. Relaxation erodes discipline. Discipline erodes results. The law is consistent. It does not reward past effort. It responds to present alignment. Those who maintain discipline continue to rise. Those who drift plateau. Plateaus are deceptive. They feel stable, but they are temporary. Without growth, decline follows. Hill emphasized continuous self-education. The mind must be fed with new ideas to remain sharp. Stagnant thinking produces stagnant income. Curiosity is a wealth trait. Those who stop learning stop adapting. Markets evolve. Opportunities shift. The law favors adaptability grounded in principle. Principle provides direction. Adaptability provides relevance. As Chunk 3 closes, the internal architecture is becoming visible. Belief is stronger. Discipline is steadier. Fear is less controlling. The law is responding with subtle confirmation, not yet dramatic, but undeniable. You are no longer guessing. You are participating consciously in cause and effect. The question now is whether you will withstand the next escalation, because the law, once activated, demands greater precision. The margin for error narrows, the stakes rise, and only those willing to refine themselves further are allowed to advance into the realm where money no longer tests survival, but tests character. The fourth movement begins where illusion finally breaks. This is the stage where the individual realizes that money is not testing intelligence, nor effort, nor even discipline anymore. It is testing internal congruence. The smallest misalignment between thought, emotion, and action now produces noticeable consequences. What once could be ignored now demands correction. This is not punishment. It is precision. The law grows more exact as capacity expands. At this level, excuses lose their emotional power. You can feel when you are lying to yourself. Rationalizations no longer provide comfort, they create tension. This is a sign of maturation. The conscience sharpens. Integrity becomes not a moral concept, but a functional necessity. Any internal contra. Addiction immediately drains energy. Hill understood that wealth beyond a certain point cannot coexist with self-deception. The mind must become a clean instrument. Here, the relationship with fear undergoes another transformation. Fear no longer shouts. It whispers. It disguises itself as caution, moderation, balance. It suggests slowing down just enough to dull momentum. This is one of the most dangerous phases because the threat is subtle. You are no longer afraid of failure. You are tempted by comfort. Comfort is seductive because it feels earned. But the law does not reward comfort, it rewards alignment. Hill observed that many people reach a level of competence and stop refining themselves. They mistake competence for mastery. Mastery requires continuous discomfort, not chaos, but deliberate challenge. You must voluntarily choose tasks that stretch capacity, sharpen judgment, and demand growth. Money flows toward those who continually increase the value they offer. Value is not static, it must evolve. This is the stage where responsibility expands. You begin to see the consequences of your decisions ripple outward. Your actions affect others. Your standards influence environments. With this awareness comes weight. Some retreat here, longing for the simplicity of anonymity. But leadership is unavoidable once internal authority is established. Whether you accept it consciously or not, others begin to mirror your discipline or resent it. Both are responses to strength. Hill taught that leadership is self-control in motion. It is not dominance, it is steadiness. Emotional volatility erodes trust. Consistency builds it. People do not follow enthusiasm, they follow reliability. Money flows through systems built on trust. Trust is built slowly and destroyed quickly. At this stage, patience is no longer about waiting for results, but about maintaining standards under pressure. The imagination now shifts again. It becomes less about envisioning success and more about anticipating complexity. You begin to see second and third order consequences. Decisions are no longer judged solely by immediate gain, but by long-term impact. This foresight is rare. It separates those who accumulate temporarily from those who build enduring wealth. The law favors endurance. Hill emphasized the importance of definiteness even as scope expands. Vague ambition returns chaos. As opportunities multiply, focus must sharpen. Not every opportunity is aligned with purpose. Discernment becomes critical. Saying no becomes as important as saying yes. Energy is finite. The law requires intelligent allocation of attention. At this level, discipline extends into rest, reflection, and recovery. Burnout is not a badge of honor, it is a failure of management. The mind and body are instruments. They require maintenance. Those who ignore this pay through diminished judgment. The law does not excuse exhaustion. It responds only to clarity. Clarity requires renewal. The concept of time deepens further. You begin to think in decades rather than weeks. Short-term fluctuations lose emotional charge. This long-range thinking stabilizes decision-making. Markets reward those who are not reactive. Reactivity is expensive. Calmness under uncertainty is a form of power. It signals confidence rooted in preparation. Hill's idea of faith now matures into quiet certainty. You no longer need constant affirmation. The internal dialogue stabilizes. Doubt still arises, but it no longer dominates. It is acknowledged and dismissed. This mental authority is subtle but profound. It allows sustained effort without drama. Drama dissipates energy. Simplicity concentrates it. Relationships are tested at this stage. Some will misunderstand your focus. Others will project their insecurities onto your discipline. You must resist the urge to explain yourself. Explanation is often a request for permission. You do not need permission to fulfill purpose. The law respects independence of thought. Conformity dilutes strength. Hill warned that envy and resentment are corrosive. At higher levels of capacity, exposure to others' success can trigger comparison. Comparison distracts from purpose. There is no competition at the level of principle. Each individual's path is unique. Focus must return repeatedly to self-mastery. The law rewards internal progress, not external rivalry. The handling of money itself changes here. It becomes quieter, more deliberate. Impulsive spending loses appeal. Investment becomes strategic. Resources are allocated with intention. Money is seen as stored energy, not emotional reward. This shift protects accumulation. Emotional spending is a leak in the system. Leaks compound just as gains do. Hill's insistence on service becomes clearer now. Wealth sustained without contribution decays. Contribution does not mean sacrifice, it means relevance. You ask not only how much can be gained, but how much value can be delivered. Markets reward those who solve meaningful problems. Meaning anchors motivation. Without meaning, even success feels hollow. At this stage, setbacks become rarer but more instructive. When errors occur, they are often the result of subtle complacency. Correction must be immediate. Delay allows erosion. The law is unforgiving of neglect at higher levels. Precision is required. Attention to detail separates stability from collapse. The invisible forces Hill spoke of now feel almost tangible, not as superstition, but as pattern recognition. You see how thought precedes outcome with increasing clarity. You witness how moods influence decisions, and decisions shape results. This awareness creates responsibility. You can no longer claim ignorance. Conscious causation replaces chance. There is also a growing detachment from outcomes. This is not indifference, it is trust in process. You commit fully to action, then release emotional attachment to result. Attachment creates tension. Tension clouds judgment. The law operates best through relaxed intensity, focus without strain. As this chunk draws to a close, the internal shift is unmistakable. Money is no longer the central concern. Mastery is. And paradoxically, as mastery becomes the focus, money becomes more consistent. Problems that once felt overwhelming now feel procedural. Challenges are met with analysis rather than emotion. You are now operating in a narrower, quieter space. Fewer people reach here. Fewer still remain. The law has refined you. It has removed excess, illusion, and weakness. What remains is capacity. The next phase will demand not just strength, but surrender of the last attachments to identity itself, because the final obstacles are not external, and they are not obvious. They exist in the deepest assumptions about who you believe you are allowed to become. The fifth passage begins where identity itself becomes the final resistance. Not the old identity of limitation and fear, but the refined identity you have built through discipline, control, and growth. This is the stage very few speak about, because it requires surrender rather than effort. Napoleon Hill hinted at this level when he spoke of the invisible counselors, the deeper intelligence, accessed when the ego no longer dominates thought. Money at this level is no longer withheld because of weakness. It is withheld until humility and detachment are complete. Up to this point, you have strengthened the will, sharpened the mind, and disciplined behavior. Now the law demands something more subtle, release of rigid self-concepts. Even strength can become a prison if it hardens into identity. The danger here is unconscious arrogance, not arrogance toward others, but toward life itself. The belief that control alone is sufficient. Control brought you far, but rigidity will stop you here. Hill observed that the greatest fortunes are not built through force alone, but through cooperation with forces beyond individual will. This does not mean passivity. It means receptivity. The mind must become quiet enough to receive insight. Many fail here because they equate silence with weakness. In reality, silence sharpens perception. When internal noise subsides, intuition emerges. Intuition is not guesswork. It is accumulated experience processed beneath conscious awareness. At this level, decision-making changes again. You no longer analyze every move exhaustively. You sense timing. You feel when to act and when to wait. This sensitivity cannot be rushed. It emerges only after years of disciplined engagement. The law rewards timing as much as effort. Acting too early is as costly as acting too late. Those who master timing conserve energy and multiply results. Money now responds more to alignment than to activity. Frantic effort yields diminishing returns. Precise action yields disproportionate gain. This can be disorienting. The old belief that effort equals reward no longer holds consistently. This is where trust is tested. You must trust the law without demanding constant proof. Doubt here reactivates struggle. Hill spoke of faith as a living state, not a static belief. At this stage, faith becomes calm expectation. There is no emotional surge, no dramatic hope. There is simply knowing. This knowing stabilizes the nervous system. Decisions are made without urgency or hesitation. Urgency is rooted in fear of lack. At this level, lack is no longer feared because capacity has been proven. The relationship with money becomes impersonal in the healthiest sense. Money is no longer used to validate worth or soothe insecurity. It is allocated, moved, and multiplied with clarity. Losses, when they occur, are treated as adjustments, not threats. This emotional neutrality protects long-term growth. The law favors those who are not reactive. Another subtle test appears here: attachment to methods. What worked before may no longer work now. Growth requires evolution. Clinging to old strategies because they once succeeded is a form of fear. The mind resists abandoning familiar tools. Yet markets change. Context shifts. The law rewards adaptability grounded in principle, not loyalty to form. Hill emphasized imagination at higher levels, not as creation of new desires, but as perception of emerging patterns. You begin to see where things are going, not just where they are. This foresight allows positioning before opportunity becomes obvious. Those who wait for certainty arrive late. Those who sense direction early gain leverage. There is also a reckoning with solitude. At this stage, internal independence is complete. You are no longer seeking validation, approval, or rescue. This independence can feel isolating, yet it is freedom. The law requires self-sufficiency of mind. Dependence creates vulnerability. Vulnerability distorts decision-making. Service now takes on deeper meaning. It is no longer strategic or calculated. It becomes natural expression. You contribute because contribution aligns with who you are, not because it promises reward. Ironically, this purity of motive often precedes the most significant financial expansion. The law responds to coherence between inner values and outer action. Hill warned that pride can re-enter disguised as humility. You may believe you have transcended desire when in fact you have suppressed it. Suppression drains vitality. Desire must remain alive but refined. It must be anchored in purpose rather than ego. Purpose expands desire beyond self. Ego contracts it. At this stage, the subconscious mind is no longer an adversary. It has been trained, disciplined, and aligned. It now works in harmony with conscious intent. Inner conflict diminishes. Energy previously wasted on self-doubt becomes available for creation. This integration produces a sense of flow. Work feels lighter even as impact increases. Money problems, if they arise, are now diagnostic rather than emotional. They signal misalignment rather than injustice. Correction is swift. There is no drama. This emotional maturity preserves clarity under pressure. The law rewards those who respond rather than react. Another quiet shift occurs in the perception of risk. Risk is no longer avoided nor chased. It is evaluated calmly. You understand that safety is an illusion, but recklessness is waste. Balance emerges naturally. This balance cannot be taught intellectually. It is earned through experience. Hill's invisible forces feel most active here. Opportunities arrive through unexpected channels. Conversations lead to breakthroughs. Timing aligns without force. This is not chance. It is alignment compounded over time. When resistance dissolves internally, life mirrors that ease externally. Yet one final barrier remains before full release. Attachment to control must soften further. Control created stability, but surrender allows expansion. This surrender is not submission. It is trust in the law you have proven repeatedly. You act decisively, then release obsession with outcome. Obsession creates tension. Tension constricts flow. As this phase nears completion, a quiet confidence replaces ambition. Not the absence of ambition, but its transformation. You are no longer chasing something ahead of you. You are expressing something through you. Money flows as a byproduct, not a pursuit. You stand now at the edge of the final realization. That wealth was never the destination. It was the training ground. The law was never about money alone. It was about mastery of self. And in mastering self, you have removed the final internal resistance. The last step will demand total responsibility, not just for success, but for the meaning you assign to it. Because the final law does not ask what you want, but what you are willing to stand for. Now comes the final reckoning, the moment where all philosophy collapses into action and all understanding is stripped of comfort. This is where the law reveals its ultimate demand, total responsibility without retreat. Not partial responsibility, not conditional responsibility, not responsibility blamed on circumstance or softened by explanation, but complete ownership of thought, decision, habit, and consequence. This is the point where money fully stops being a problem, because life itself stops being negotiated. At this stage, there is no illusion left to protect. You can no longer pretend that results are mysterious. You can no longer attribute outcomes to chance, luck, timing, or fate. You see clearly now that every condition in your life is the result of accumulated mental choices. This realization is heavy. It is also liberating, because if you are the cause, then you are also the solution. Hill understood that freedom begins where excuse ends. The law now operates with ruthless honesty. It mirrors your inner state immediately. Delay between cause and effect shortens. When discipline slips, consequences appear faster. When clarity sharpens, opportunities accelerate. This responsiveness is not pressure, it is confirmation that you are no longer a beginner. The law treats you according to your level of consciousness. At this level, there are no training wheels. Here, success is no longer about accumulation. It is about expression. Money becomes the visible residue of inner order. You do not chase it because you do not need to. Need implies lack. You operate from capacity, from creation, from contribution. Money follows because it must. It is the natural companion of value delivered with precision and integrity. You now understand why so few reach this point. It demands the death of the victim identity completely, not just the obvious victim of hardship, but the subtle victim of potential, the one who believes they are almost ready, nearly capable, just one break away. That identity must die. There are no breaks coming. There is only execution. Hill's philosophy was never meant to comfort. It was meant to awaken. The awakening is this: no one is coming. No system will save you. No circumstance will align itself for your convenience. Life responds only to those who command themselves. And command is not force. It is decision sustained over time. At this level, fear is no longer an enemy. It is a signal. When fear appears, you do not retreat. You ask what expansion it is guarding. Fear marks the edge of growth. You move forward not recklessly, but deliberately. Courage becomes habitual. The nervous system adapts. What once felt overwhelming now feels necessary. The mind is now your instrument, not your battlefield. Thoughts arise, but they do not dominate. Emotions surface, but they do not rule. You choose deliberately what occupies attention. This sovereignty of mind is the true wealth Hill pointed to. Money is simply the most visible confirmation of it. You stop waiting for certainty because you understand that certainty is created through motion. You stop waiting for confidence because you know confidence is built through keeping promises to yourself. You stop waiting for permission because you recognize that permission seeking is disguised fear. The law does not reward those who ask, it rewards those who decide. Responsibility now extends beyond personal gain. You understand that your discipline influences others whether you intend it or not. Your standards raise or lower environments. This awareness removes the temptation to live small. Smallness is no longer harmless. It is negligence. You realize that unexpressed potential is not humility, it is waste. Hill spoke of definiteness of purpose as the anchor of all achievement. Now that purpose is no longer fragile. It is embodied. You do not need to announce it. It governs your choices quietly. Every action either aligns with it, or is rejected. This simplicity creates power. Power creates momentum. Momentum attracts resources. Money no longer enters your life through struggle, but through structure. Systems replace desperation. Strategy replaces guessing. Calm replaces urgency. This is not ease. It is mastery. The law has not become kinder. You have become stronger. At this final stage, there is one last temptation: to pause, to rest indefinitely, to enjoy the view and stop climbing. This is the final illusion. Growth does not stop without decay beginning. The law requires continuous expansion of capacity, not frantic growth, but intentional evolution. You must continue refining thought, sharpening discipline, deepening purpose. This is where commitment becomes permanent. Not commitment to a goal, but commitment to a way of being. You are no longer committed until you succeed. You are committed because this is who you are now. Identity and action are unified. There is no separation left to exploit. You understand now that money was never the true prize. The prize was self-command. Money simply followed because it had no choice. It always obeys the one who obeys law. It always avoids the one who resists responsibility. So this is where the narration ends and your decision begins. Not tomorrow, not after more preparation, not when conditions improve. Now, you either accept full responsibility for your mind, your habits, your results, and your future, or you return to negotiation and remain exactly where you are. There is no middle ground. There is no comfort version of this law. You either live deliberately or you live by default. You either command your inner world or remain subject to it. Money will reflect your choice without mercy and without exception. Decide now that excuses are finished. Decide now that discipline is non-negotiable. Decide now that fear will no longer dictate direction. Decide now that your purpose is worth the price it demands, because the moment you commit without reservation, the law responds with equal force. Take responsibility. Take command. Take action, and do not retreat.